Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Roadie Psychology Podcast, the podcast where travel meets psychology. My name is Pamela, and you guessed it, I'm a psychologist with a passion for travel. In Roadie Psychology, we meet travelers and psychologists who share their adventure stories through concepts of psychology. Hey, do you guys want to go get a drink tonight? Alcohol consumption is such a normal part of our social lives that it's almost difficult to imagine living without it. We go out on Thirsty Thursday, and on Friday nights, we celebrate Crate Day in New Zealand, we wine around a glass of wine, or we have a mimosa for brunch. We have a beer while watching football, we celebrate a wedding with champagne, and we just love happy hour. We drink alcohol to celebrate, to socialize, to relax, to have fun. But do we really? Over the past few years, more and more people are becoming sober curious. Robbie Warrington defines sober curiosity as the idea that someone chooses to question the drinking experiences, such as drinking invitations or expectations of drinking, rather than mindlessly going along with the dominant drinking culture. Being sober curious is for everyone. You do not need to feel like you have an issue with alcohol to be sober curious. It's not all or nothing, but it is about being more mindful of the choices that you make, the reasons why you make those choices, and how these choices affect your life. So, although it can be quite difficult to go against cultural norms, being sober curious can take your relationship with yourself to a whole new level, and it has great benefits for you. Beyond the obvious physical health benefits, lowering your alcohol consumption also improves your sleep, your memory, and your relationship with others. So, I have a few questions for you. In what circumstances do you drink? Why do you drink? And do you enjoy drinking? What would your life look like with less alcohol in it? Today's episode is the first part of my conversation with Alex. Alex, also known as Sober Yoga Girl, is a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, certified life coach, entrepreneur, podcaster, and certified teacher in Ontario. Alex is the founder of the Mindful Life Practice Community and Sober Curious Yoga. In this episode, we talk about her life abroad, her struggles with mental health, and how alcohol helped her cope with her mood disorder. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and that Alex's story will give you a different outlook on alcohol. So, are you guys ready? Let's hit the road. Hi Alex, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you. So I'm very happy to have you today for my podcast. Thank you so much for accepting my little invitation.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be on it.
Yeah, all right. Well, before we start, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a Canadian currently living in Bali in Indonesia. I just moved here about a month ago, but I have been living overseas for the past 7 years. So I lived in the Middle East for the past 6 years. And I am the creator of an online sober yoga community called the Mindful Life Practice. And I teach yoga classes, lead meditations, help people quit drinking and develop a spiritual yoga practice, and I also lead 200-hour yoga teacher trainings.
All right. So that's quite a lot. And how long have you been doing all of that?
Yeah, so I have actually been teaching yoga part-time for about 7 years. So I've been teaching yoga for a long time. I was teaching yoga since before I was ever even a school teacher. And it was always my dream to do it full time, but I just did not know how it would be possible, how it would be feasible. Everyone always says you can't make a career out of yoga. And so I was a school teacher full time to kind of pay the bills. And I was doing that for 6 years. And then it was during the pandemic that I was able to really innovatively create this online platform, which is amazing because I can be anywhere and do my job, which is so cool. And so I just quit teaching in June. So I've only been doing it full time for about 6 months, but I've been part time doing this work for a long time.
So, to go back a little bit and start the story in the right order, first, can you tell us a little bit about your travel story? Because obviously it seems important to you. But
Yeah,
can you tell us about your travel story?
absolutely. So I grew up in Toronto and I had a pretty normal childhood in terms of my travel experiences. I did the typical, Canadians would go down to Florida or the Caribbean to get a little bit of warmth and heat in the winter season. And I did have a few adventures when I was in early high school. So I did go on a high school trip to Italy when I was 16, and then I went on another trip to Benin, West Africa when I was 17. But I wouldn't say that I had a super, like, I don't think I had a really big traveling sort of childhood. Like, I just think I did an average amount of traveling. And the reason why I moved overseas was actually more because my parents wanted me to follow a traditional path and become a teacher. And the thing about teaching jobs is that it's actually quite competitive in Canada. So it's right now things are changing with COVID, but back when I was graduating, which was 7 years ago, it was very hard to get a teaching job in Canada. And so they were really promoting us to go abroad. And so I had this amazing mentor who had taught for 2 years in Egypt. And he said to me, Alex, just go abroad. Like, even if you don't like it, you'll never know until you try. And you'll have this amazing experience. You can just do it for 2 years. And so I moved to Kuwait when I was 23, never thinking that I would spend, almost all of my 20s in the Middle East, but
Yeah,
I
right.
just fell in love with it. It was just incredible. Like, to be a teacher and to have these long weekends and these holidays and all of these destinations within a few hours flight, like, it was just incredible. And so I ended up, extending. I stayed for 2 years in Kuwait and then 4 years teaching in Abu Dhabi, and it was phenomenal.
I guess it was kind of unexpected, wasn't it?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And how important would you say traveling is to you now then?
It is. I think the purpose of traveling has changed a little bit to me. So I think when I was first in Kuwait, what I was really into was like all these trips and having all these cool Instagrams of me being on all these cool places. And now I would say I'm less obsessed with, like, when I was younger, I was really obsessed with like going to all these new places and getting all these cool new photos and saying that I had been to certain places. And now I feel like I'm less chasing that need to travel so frequently and like impress other people, if that makes sense. It's more just about myself and finding places where I feel, joy and peaceful. And so I feel less obsessed with like checking all the things off the list, if that makes sense. But I definitely can't see myself going back to Canada at any point. Like, I think I just am more at home overseas.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you said when you said take things off the list. It's kind of like you went from the bucket list kind of traveling to
Yeah.
the actually moving and living to,
Yeah.
you stay at one place for a few years and then you move to another one and then you move to another one. So you're not traveling as often, but you're traveling in a way more. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Exactly. That's a great thing to think about. I was definitely the bucket list traveler for a long time. And I think it was really COVID that shifted me because I found that I actually found a lot of peace being in Abu Dhabi for a long time. And, I actually feel very at peace being in Bali for a long time right now. And so, yeah, exactly. Less of the bucket list traveler.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And speaking of Bali, a few years ago, you went there for the first time. Can you tell us a little bit about that first trip there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I traveled to Bali for the first time in 2017. And it had been kind of a dream of mine to go to Bali for a long time because I was really into yoga and I wanted to do my yoga teacher training. And Bali was one of the places I looked at, but it just seemed so far away, so foreign. And I did my first yoga teacher training before I moved overseas. So I felt like I had to do something in like the North America region. And so I did my first training in 2014 in Mexico. But when I decided to do my advanced training, I was like, I really, really want to go to Bali. So I found a yoga teacher training in Bali for summer of 2017, and that was my plan. And I planned it, I think, almost a year in advance. It was a month-long training. And then in the time between when I planned it, I met someone and ended up falling in love with him. And we ended up getting married. And our honeymoon, so the way we planned the trip was we were going to do this 2-week honeymoon, and then this month long I was going to do this month long yoga teacher training in Bali, and he was going to leave. And what ended up happening is the night before we were about to get on the plane and fly to Bali, we ended up ending our relationship. And it was so hard. For me, I was the one who ended the relationship. For me, it was like this gut feeling in me that I had made like the biggest mistake in my life.
Hmm.
And I had so much guilt and I was going through this mental health crisis. I was alone in Kuwait. I had zero support. Mental health was not really a thing back then in the Middle East. It has definitely improved in Abu Dhabi since that time, but there were no resources and no support for me. And so I ended up canceling the whole trip to Bali and flying back to Canada to get mental health support. And I was planning on not going to Bali at all, but I couldn't get that yoga teacher training refunded.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing my mental health recovery in Canada for a few months. And then once I had recovered, I ended up flying to Bali a few months later and doing my yoga teacher training. And this for me was like this, it was just this transformative month because, I in Canada, I was put on medication for my mood disorder and I was doing therapy, and that's all great. And it's all talk, but actually integrating it into your body and learning about the yoga philosophy, like that was the key thing. That was the key thing for me in my mental health recovery. It was so important to have this holistic body, mind, spirit recovery that just went beyond what could be done in a therapist's office. And I just decided, I want to be in Bali for the rest of my life, but obviously, I needed to get a job.
Yeah.
I needed to like go back to society. And so I ended up very fortunately getting a job as a teacher in Abu Dhabi. And so I was able to leave Bali and start a new life in Abu Dhabi, which was brilliant. But I remember when I arrived in Abu Dhabi, I actually met this woman on the first day who gave me a carpool into my new job. And I'm still friends with her, 5 years later. And she said to me the other day, when she picked me up and drove me into work that day, I was talking about moving to Bali 5 years ago. And so it's just always been that thing for me, that place.
Yeah, it's always been there in your head, but it must have been quite challenging going through all of that. You still have that dream in your mind, but then you might have associated it with your honeymoon that didn't happen either. How did you
Hmm.
deal with all of that and the fact that you had to go back home to Canada as well after living abroad for a few years?
Yeah, it was so hard. And I, for a long time, I had this like, I had this guilt of like, I am a horrible person because I have said I would marry someone and then changed my mind. I felt like I was a terrible person. And that was like the root of it all. I actually felt like I didn't deserve to live anymore because I was like, what kind of person would do this to someone else? And it has taken me so long and so much time to realize that me leaving him was actually me being a good person. And even if he didn't see it that way at the time, and even if he's never going to forgive me for what I did to him, it was me being a good person, because there are so many people that will live out an entire lifetime in this marriage that is not right for them, or in this job that's not right for them. And it would be a lifetime of misery for him, because it was 2 months of misery when we were married, because I was miserable. And I in letting him go, it was like the best thing I could have done for either of us. But it took me years to understand that. And now he has gotten engaged to someone else. He's getting married to someone else, which I only know because I stalked him on social media. I haven't not spoken to him in 5 years. Like, he's blocked me off of everything. So I only know because he unblocked me and I saw, and I'm just so happy. And I'm like, this is why it all happened, right? Like, there was someone else out there for you. And I really needed to come to this place of being able to forgive myself. And that was the key like healing that Bali gave me. And even though it was associated with my honeymoon, I was able to kind of overcome that and let it be a healing place for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy because I feel like the way you talk, it was more when you actually decided to break up with your husband at the time. It was kind of like you were trying to reconnect with yourself and being more honest with how you were feeling
Hmm.
and respecting those feelings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. And so, how was it? So you said you went home to Canada, and you said that you had to take care of your mental health. How was it for you? Can you share a little bit about your struggle with your mental health?
Yeah. So I was in a really low state, a really serious state of depression at that point. I was actually having suicidal thoughts and wanting to end my life. And I had previously been diagnosed with a mood disorder a couple years prior. So back when I was living in Canada in 2014, right when I became a yoga teacher, I had been diagnosed with a mood disorder. I was put on a really low dose of mood stabilizers because I was functioning pretty well at the time. I was doing so much yoga, I was eating healthy, I was living a really balanced life, and everything was all good. And the truth of what was happening back then in Canada is that there was such a big mental health crisis on my university campus that there was, one psychiatrist for thousands of students. And
Hmm.
so I healed. He was happy with my progress. He sent me on my way and I never saw him again, which I don't blame him at all, because I know that, I was highly functioning and I was doing well. And he it was fine. He did his job and my medication was working, but I got sent on my way and I was on a dose of like 25 milligrams, which someone with a mood disorder should be on like 250 milligrams, right?
Yeah.
And it was fine because I was living in Canada and it was good. But then I decided to move to Kuwait, and I didn't know that, moving abroad, I would have this like extreme culture shock, and I needed things and support in place, and I would lose my community. And I just didn't know any of this. And so I just went away with this small dose of medication. And the reality is that those 2 years in Kuwait, I was like in crisis constantly. And then there was no psychiatry. And my husband at the time, this was one of the big problems. Like there were so many issues in our relationship, but one of them was that he didn't think there was anything wrong with me. He's like, "You're a normal girl." I don't think there's anything wrong with you. And for me to have, I lived many years in my teenagehood of people saying that to me. "I don't think anything's wrong with you." And I actually diagnosed myself through reading a psychology textbook when I was 18. Like I was like, this is what I have. And my parents didn't think that I had this issue. And so I lived so many years with people telling me like, you're fine, you're fine. And it's this crazy thing because it's like no one fakes having a mood disorder,
Yeah.
like no one is making this up. No one is pretending that they're struggling for attention, but there was some weird thing in the early millennium of like us thinking that people were like, you know, attention seeking and pretending there was something wrong with them. And so anyway, I was just really struggling in Kuwait. And so I was diagnosed, but I just didn't have all of the things in order. And what I really needed was like the correct mood disorder medication dosage. And I needed like doctors to be regularly checking in on me. And I needed community and support. And I needed, a healthy workplace. And I just had this complete recipe of like stress, and it just caused me to kind of fall apart there. And so I really luckily came back to Canada where I was able to be seen right away. Like I was in crisis, I was having suicidal thoughts, and they were able to get me to the top of the list and increase my medication dosage, which was hard. No one likes their medication dosage to be increased because you numb out and you stop feeling things. And it's really, really hard. And actually, the only reason that I went along with these dosage increases was because they were giving me sick notes to not return to Kuwait, which I just really, really didn't want to go. And so every time, they increased me every 2 weeks, 25 milligrams, and I got another 2 week sick note. And that was why I went along with it. And as it kept increasing, things like started actually getting better.
Mhm.
And so the medication increase really, really helped me. But at the same time, I also had this alcohol thing going on, which so many people who suffer from mood disorders have this, because you end up like, I know my situation was that I was going through these mental health crises alone as a young person, and people were not believing me. People weren't validating me. I wasn't getting the support I needed. And so I started turning to alcohol to cope with it. And then over time, you become addicted to alcohol as a coping mechanism. And even when you're put on the medication, you're already addicted. And it's just this cycle, right? And it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like the mental health or the alcohol? Or they definitely created this recipe for disaster.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then I find it interesting because at the same time you want to be acknowledged. You want your pain and your suffering to be recognized as such. But at the same time you don't want to be ostracized either. And I feel like that's the issue with a lot of, mental health issues, is that you want people to understand what's going on, but that doesn't make you a different person either. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then, may I ask, so you said you went and you took medication to help you, but then you went through a different, more holistic and body slash spiritual approach. Has your view on medication changed since then, or do you think it was still very helpful for you at the time?
So I still take my medication, and I've taken it for 7 years now at this point. And I definitely feel, for me, it was necessary for me to get to this point. And now I rely on it, but I also know that it's not right for everyone. And I think for everyone, it's like finding that recipe of success. But I definitely think there's some people that can manage their mental health through yoga, through spirituality. There's some people that do it through medication. There's some people that use both. I definitely, there are certain things about the medication that I don't like. But I definitely think that if I didn't have the medication, would be it would be harder for me to cope with life.
Yeah.
So I still take my medication, and I definitely think for everyone, it's like an individual journey of finding what's right for them.
Yeah, so it's about getting to know your own self in a way, how you react to medication and what's helpful, what's not, the dosage and
Hmm.
everything really.
Totally.
And so going back also to the alcohol addiction that you were talking about, you said it was your way of coping, and you said it was quite difficult as a young woman to cope with your mental health issues with alcohol as well, because alcohol is usually associated with middle-aged men. So how did that feel, being a young woman suffering from this addiction?
Well, you know what? I actually don't even think I was aware that I had a drinking problem. I think that there are so many people that have issues with their drinking. There's so many people that drink to excess. Partying is so normal that I think I thought I was, I just had a normal thing with drinking. At the same time, I was Googling like how to quit drinking, how to stop drinking, but I don't know if I really knew that I had such a serious problem. And it wasn't until I finally had the courage to quit. At the same time, I hadn't gone a week without drinking since I was like 15. And I had never done, sober January, dry January, sober October, could never even imagine a month without alcohol. And when I finally decided to quit drinking, it was because I kept getting these targeted ads for this program to help people quit drinking. And I ended up, making it about 2 weeks into sobriety and realizing I had a pretty tough withdrawal. And I realized that I definitely had an issue with it. And I think it was at the very beginning going through sobriety, it was really shameful. I was really embarrassed about it. I didn't want anyone to know, was keeping it a secret, keeping it off of social media. And it took me a really long time to have this pivot where I realized, me getting sober is actually something to be really proud of, because this is a world that glorifies drinking and it's an alcohol obsessed world. And to be able to break free from that is like a massive achievement. And I had to have this shift around realizing that, sobriety was something to celebrate. And now I feel really proud of the journey that I've been on, but definitely in the beginning, it was something that I was very ashamed of. And I see that in a lot of my clients. They're really embarrassed about what they're going through.
Yeah, and like you said, I find it that with alcohol, what is difficult as well is that it's such a socially accepted drug at the end, you
Yeah.
could call it a drug, that not only you have to break through your own addiction and your own, the physical symptoms of it, but also the whole social aspect that comes with it. You go to a party, the first thing people are going to ask is, oh, what do you drink? What do you want? And so
Hmm.
you have to deconstruct the norms in a way and be able to stand by your own values and what you want for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like that makes it quite difficult as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Roadie Psychology. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the episode, please give me little stars on your favorite listening platform and subscribe to be the first to listen to the next ones. You can also follow me on Instagram @Roadie Psychology and invite your friends to join us on this journey through psychology. If you have any comments, questions, or if you feel like participating in the podcast, feel free to send me a little message. See you soon for another journey.